And I have something I gotta kind of touch on, and this is in relation to boxing. Terence Crawford. I'm noticing, I don't know, and I'm really interested in hearing what you have to say about this in the championship rounds. But I am noticing a much more outspoken and direct, and dare I say, a tad bit aggressive Terence Crawford. And I mean that mostly in a good way, right? Because, it seems like he's building fights so much more so maybe with just some of the things that he said. And I'm going to tell you kind of what I mean, right? Now, Terence has never been one, I would say, to back down from someone coming at him or whatever. But I'm just noticing a little bit of a difference here. Like, so I believe it was Jermell Charlo, started to talk a little bit. He mentioned Terence Crawford. Terence Crawford simply tweeted at him, "Keep my name out your mouth." That's a little bit unlike what he's done on social media most of the time. Here and there, you'll see a little bit of that. But one thing that really kind of stuck out to me is that he said that he was confident that in his mind that when and if he fights Errol Spence, he's going to F him up. And that was a little, I'm like, so every single layer, he went on Chris Mannix's show and he was talking very freely, shared a lot of opinions. Some of them weren't that popular. He just did this is a different side of Terence Crawford. And I can't say that I can't say I don't like it. It's just very interesting. And I'm kind of watching, how people use the popcorn emoji, like watch the show. I'm kind of watching to see how this is going to evolve, what's going to happen, especially once quarantine's over and now it's time to actually start making these fights. Because we're saying and we're mentioning a lot of people, but are we going to see these fights, take place, or are we just going to be still picking from the scraps that are left at Top Rank for Terence Crawford in and around his weight class? So I'm really waiting to see what happens for him at that point. But that is my rant, and like I said, I can't wait to hear what you have to say about that.
Well, look, the saying, right? An idle mind is the devil's playground. Mm-hmm. And I think when you're sitting around and you just don't have that goal or that fight to look forward to or the ability to be in camp, I think that you just have more of an opportunity to get in conversations. Mm-hmm. You have more of an opportunity, to do more interviews,
do social media, talk about
everything,
people in the face, in getting suspended like Billy Joe Saunders.
Right, but I also think that somebody like Terence, who's not exactly media aggressive, mm-hmm. He doesn't initiate a lot of conversations over social media. He doesn't do a ton of interviews. He's not the biggest self-promoter. No. I think what happens is when he starts seeing other people using his name to get some shine or to get some ink, I think it's starting to bother him. And look, Bob Arum came out yesterday and said Pacquiao Crawford's a possibility. Mm-hmm. I mean, who knows? I mean, I don't know. But the point is that I think that for Terence, I think he's just hearing so many people talk about fighting him, and everybody wants to fight someone when they can't.
Mm-hmm. Everybody.
You know what I mean? And the other thing is, whether other people are calling him out or saying, well, look, everybody wants a big fight. A lot of guys are sitting home wondering right now when they're getting their next purse, right? When they're getting their next payday. Look, the Terence Crawford that's being more vocal, maybe seeming a bit more aggressive. Well, that's the guy that fights in the ring.
Yes, it is.
I mean, so it's like you're coming at him, and this is how he's.
What's going to happen?
This is how he's getting that aggression out right now.
It is.
And that's the guy that you're fighting in the ring. Mm-hmm. Normally, he just, he's the nicest guy in the world. Mm-hmm. Low key, fun to be around, very personable, very fan friendly. I think what's happening is when guys like Jermell Charlo or Errol Spence or even maybe Bob talking about Pacquiao I think all of this is, could be frustrating mm-hmm. Crawford. And I think basically the only platform he has to respond is via social media. And I think, what we're seeing is just some of that frustration also come out. But, at the same time, it's so easy for people to call someone out when they know a fight can't be made.
Yeah. And, I think that what you're saying is actually has some validity, because what I started to notice, and I really noticed this, I felt in the Kavalauskas fight.
Mm-hmm.
Terence, as you said, is not a big self-promoter. He's not this type of guy who generally is going to go on social media. He's not calling people out. He's not on Instagram taking pictures on a bed of hundreds and doing anything like that. And every time he go shopping, he's not taking pictures of the bags and all of that. He's not that kind of guy, right? And I think that for many fans, it's a refreshing thing. But at the same token, he knows that he is at least a top 2-3 fighter in the world. He knows that.
Right.
So what has to happen is every single time he steps into the ring, it almost feels as though there's this burden to prove it and to make up for the fact that I'm not gaining ink, I'm not gaining spotlight, I'm not gaining attention doing anything else. I got to make all my fights look a certain way. And I think we even heard Gervonta mention some of that when we were interviewing him, how the people talking about the KO record drive is bringing pressure to him. Well, I think Terence, it looked this way against Kavalauskas, who is a guy who's a good fighter. But I think from an overall skill standpoint, Terence could have outclassed him in a much safer fight where he didn't have to take shots, didn't have to take what I thought was a legitimate knockdown.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't have to do that, but he did it. He put himself out there, made himself vulnerable to create a great fight or to create an action-packed fight.
But this is what he does. I mean, so it's really very, very much in line with his character and how he fights, because he's a very smart fighter. Kavaliauskas is a power puncher. Mm-hmm. Okay. So, him posing some problems or Terence adapting to avoid that power was not something that was unforeseen. I mean, obviously the question was, could Kavaliauskas find, a home for his power? But just like in true Crawford form, eventually as the fight goes on, he finds the holes, he breaks you down, and then he stops you. And it's exactly what happened in that fight. So it wasn't like, look, they're talking. Look, we were all talking and hearing about him fighting Sean Porter and then fighting Errol Spence. Mm-hmm. And that would seem like the trajectory. Mm-hmm. And I think that fighting Porter is going to bring out the best in Terence Crawford. Yes, because it's going to be impossible to be a boring fight.
It's impossible. I don't know if I've ever seen a boring.
Sean Porter brought out the best in Errol Spence. Mm. You know what I'm saying? Like, meaning he made him do things that he hadn't had to do yet as a pro. But Sean Porter really put himself back in the conversation as one of the top 3 or 4 welterweights. Yeah, it was you couldn't have a better loss, right, than what Sean Porter had. And I think that I think him and Crawford would be a very exciting fight.
Oh, I think it's a fantastic fight.
I mean, these two, it's going to be, and you know what? I think that if things could get back on track and that fight could manifest, and then if Crawford could fight Spence, I think we're back on track as to where we need to be. But in the meantime, he's at home like everybody else, and he sees people talking about him.
Yeah,
and I think he's just like he just wants to bark back.
Yeah, he's on the porch, and it's that dog on the porch, and he's been watching people walk back and forth, and now they're starting to get in his yard a little bit. Right, and it's like I'm already antsy. I haven't been able to do what I normally would do. So I definitely agree, but I do think that he fought a little bit more than he boxed, especially early against Kavalauskas. And I what you're saying is right. He did ultimately figure him out, which is what Terence does. To me, that's to me is his greatest strength as a fighter, is his ability to make adjustments on the fly. Not everybody can do that. Very few, a handful of fighters are able to do that. Most guys come out with a plan A, and if you have an answer for their plan A, you're going to beat them that night. It's just what it is. Only few guys have that ability to adjust. I think Terence is definitely one of those guys, and that's what he did. But I think along the way, he put himself in more danger than what he had to do. And I have to feel like he did that because it just looked like he wanted to put on a great fight. Obviously, he wanted to win. Yeah. Obviously, he wanted to win. But it felt like it's almost like you want to beat a guy in a certain kind of way because that.
Yeah. But I mean, it is what it is. I mean, with knowing what was looming down the road, I don't think he was going to take any chances either.
I think it's just ultimate confidence, though, in himself. Yeah. I feel like he probably is like, could I beat this guy just standing outside and boxing? Yeah, I could. But I also feel like I'm almost 100% positive I can beat him in this firefight too. And that's who I am. I'm a dog. I'm gonna do that.
So to tie that thought, Brian,
yeah,
to and I'm gonna go back because I just got on this Keith Thurman thing, right? And the guy rubbed me the wrong way earlier. Jester with Lomachenko. So here's one thing I'll point out, which I'm going to digress a little bit, but not really, because it's about being able to adapt. Mm-hmm. It's about being able to overcome. So with Lomachenko, in case you're thinking that we think Lomachenko is not a great fighter, couldn't be any further from the truth. And the example that I will give, and then I'll tie it to Thurman, was this: Lomachenko was injured, I guess, his shoulder against Linares.
Against Linares, got dropped.
Got dropped, saw himself on the seat of his pants, and you know what he did? He adapted, and he found a way to stop that guy with a beautiful body shot.
Yes, good fight. I'm talking about
end the story, right? And if Thurman was hurt, well, he could have adapted. The bigger, stronger, longer man could have adapted and found a way to beat Pacquiao, but he couldn't.
And Lomachenko was a smaller guy than Linares.
Right. So anyway, I'm just saying, and with Crawford, I was at that fight at Madison Square Garden on December 14th. And Crawford was in a real fight against a very credible contender. But that's all that Kavaliauskas was, a contender.
Yes.
And while I understand what you're saying, that he wants to entertain, I think he still has a very methodical way he goes about his business. Mm-hmm. And I think that he understood what he was up against and that it was going to be a matter of more like attrition. Mm-hmm. He was going to have to break this guy down and then put his foot on the pedal and finish it. And ultimately, that's what he did.
Yeah, it is what he did. Obviously, he was a better fighter. And I knew that would come out. But I'm always looking at, winning and taking the least amount of damage. And in the game plan or in the way he was executing inside the ring, I'm looking and I'm like, they're fighting in a phone booth and there's no reason why. Kavaliauskas is a smaller guy from a height standpoint. His arms are shorter. He wants to fight on the inside. He's really compact. Terence can beat this guy up from the outside, but it's just like he didn't want to. He didn't want to. And so that was kind of where I got that from.